So let me point out to you guys about your test. So let me share the screen to you guys. So again, your midterm is next week. Yep, your midterm is next week. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, next Wednesday, next Thursday, next Friday. Depends on your last name, A to E, F to N, or O to Z. Um, you will be on CBT 211. When you go to the CBT building, you have to make a left of it, and then it's on the second floor. 211 is on the second floor. So make sure you guys, if you guys doesn't know where is it at, and I will recommend you to come early, so that you guys can so you guys will be there early. So the test starts at 9:30. I would suggest you guys to come around like 9, or even like if you want to come because or even 8:45, earlier the better. The reason why is because at 9 o'clock at CBT 1211, I will go over the review for your test. So please, if you guys are free on the day, on your test day, come 30 minutes early, like 9 o'clock. I will review the midterms with you guys for the 30 minutes, and then after that you will take the test at 9:30. And the test is at 1.5 hours long. The test is around like 14, 15 questions. So it's only 14 or 15 questions in your test. So it will take you around an hour and a half to finish it. So you do not need to, so I will recommend you guys to come early, come at 9 o'clock, so that we at the first and then 30 minutes we'll review for your midterm here. And then from 9:30 to 11, you will take the test. Okay, so make sure you guys come on the time. If you cannot show up on the day that you're supposed to be, I will recommend you to email to me as soon as possible, because there are limited spaces in there. That classroom can only fit like 15 students. So once all 15, and then like 12 or 13 of you guys will be in the classroom. So there will be only have 2 students left that you want to move around. So if you cannot make it on the day that you are, please email to me as soon as possible. So your midterm is gonna be 30% of your final grade. Okay. So this is the first thing I want to point out to you. Your midterm is next Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So make sure you guys come according to your name. So next is the review for your test. So a lot of students ask me, where can I get the review for your test? You can get the review for the test in your textbook. So if you go to the ebook or your real textbook that you have, so if you go to the real ebook or textbook, if you go under chapter 2, because your test is on chapter 2, just the whole chapter 2, 2:1 till 2:7. So your test will be on the whole chapter 2 here. So so what you do here is you go to the chapter 2 here, you go to the very end of chapter 2. That's called a chapter test. Okay, so if you click on the chapter test, this is the one that I'm talking about. So if you want to study for your test this coming week, I would recommend you to do all the chapter tests on the back of chapter 2 here. They are around like 22 questions, but you don't get 22, you only get like 14 or 15 questions, and the answer is right here. So if you click on it, they will have answers on it. So I will recommend you guys to really practice on this one. So there will be the answers are over here. And do not forget that you have to get a scientific calculators for your test. So these are the calculators that you're only allowed to use the test, not the graphing ones. And if you do not have a scientific calculator, you might borrow it from me. So I will bring along some scientific calculators. So your test, you're only allowed to use the scientific calculator, not the graphing ones. Okay, so if you use the graphing ones, if you use the graphing calculators, then you will not allow. Then you have to move it to the scientific one. Anyone clear on the test here? And you have any questions on your test next week before we start with 2.5 and 2.6? Questions on the test? You guys good? All right. So next thing we're going to talk about here is your your homework. So we start with 2.5 first. Anyone have any questions on 2.5 transformation? Some people ask me, is there any, like, can I bring any formulas or anything? The answer is no, there's no form. You are not allowed to bring anything. So it's closed book, closed notes in your midterms and your finals. So you're not allowed to use any formulas or any types of help. So make sure you guys understand this transformation in this case. Anyone have questions on the transformation? Anyone? Okay, you guys are quiet. So I am going to go talk about one of the questions because it's going to be in your test midterm next week. I'm going to do, because you guys are so quiet here. So I'm going to do question number 12. Is it 12? Let me see something more difficult. Let's do 14. Let's do question number 12. Yep. I'm going to make it more difficult because that question is not tough. Yep. Let's do 12. All right. I'm going to make this a bit more difficult because question 12 is a little bit easy, but then I will make it a bit tough for you guys. So because your test will be a bit more tough. So for question 12, this is what you will get in my midterm test next week. Again, there is no multiple choice like this. You have to write your own. So please pay attention because this is the most important piece that a lot of students miss. The first question they ask you here is to identify the parent function. What is the parent function that some of you will ask me? The parent function is this called the parent function. Is that going to be x squared, x cubed, square root, cube root, absolute value, or the step function? This is what we call as your parent function. So some of you who do not know what is a parent function means this is a parent function. So for this question, since you see a square root of x, so your parent function in this case will be a square root of x. So if you see like this, it has an x squared, so the parent function in this case will be x squared. So some of you see this is an x cubed, so the parent function in this case will be x cubed. So it depends on, so these are what we call as a parent function. So, so this is the first thing you guys need to do in your test is to identify your parent's function. So please really pay attention here because this is worth a lot of points in your test, okay? Next, we're gonna talk about here is the transformation. Okay. They say describe the sequence of a transformation. So this question number 12, so we're doing 12 here. You will have gx of 1/2 of square root of x. So the good thing is this one you only have one transformation, which is the 1/2, and that 1/2 in this case is actually the vertical shrink. So shrink and compress is the same thing. So when I say vertical compress, it's the same thing as a vertical shrink. So the reason why that this is a vertical shrink is because this number is between 0 and 1. To have a vertical stretch, this number will be greater than 1. So if you have like 2 root x, this 2 will be what we call as a vertical stretch. Okay, so this will become a vertical shrink. And the good thing is this one you only have one transformation. So you do not need to do any more transformation in this case. And then you have to sketch the graph. Now, in your test, I just want to point out to you guys again, this is very important. In your test, you have to do 2 graphs. Okay. In your test, not like here, you only draw 1 graph. In the test, you have to do 2 graphs. The first graph is what you have to draw is your parent graph. Okay. So in your test, you have to draw your parent graph first. And your parent graph in this case is the square root of x. So it looks something like this. So this is what you have to do in the test. So you have to draw the first, the parent graph, and the second, the g of x. The function that given to you in this question. So since 1/2, that means that all your y value will be divided by 2. So that, or cut into half. So that means your square root will look a little bit, will be 1/2 smaller than the original graph. So so this is the graph that you have to draw. So in your test, you have to draw me 2 graphs. One is the parent graph and one is the g of x. So a lot of students forget to draw the parent graph. That's why it is wrong. So your answer in this case will be D. Okay. And lastly, this is a question that a lot of students ask me, is how do you write this g in terms of f? A lot of students have asked me that. Now, since we know the parent function is fx is equals to the square root of x. So what does that mean here is that you take this whole thing and you replace it to your f of x, to your x squared. So what happens in this case is your g of x in this case is going to be 1/2 of f of x. So this is how you write this, what we call as a g in terms of f, is you replace this parent function, the square of x, into f of x. So your answer in this case will be 1/2. So this is how we do this kind of questions. And as I point out to you that this question is a little bit easy because you only got one transformation. So I'm going to go through doing a few more difficult ones. So I'm going to do question 14, but I will change it. Okay. So I will change question 14 a little bit because 14 is not that difficult. It's all right, but not too tough. But I'm going to put something next to it. So g of x is equals to negative. I put a negative in front of it. Okay. So -4. So I put a negative in front of it. So because in your test, it will look a little bit more difficult than like the one I showed you. I put a negative in here instead of the one without the negative. So I want you guys to tell me, A, what is your parent function in this case? Anyone know what is a parent function in this case?
Value of x.
Absolute value of x, yep. So this worth 1 already. If you tell me this, you got 1 point in your test already. Yes, this is how we do this. B, you have to describe the sequence of the transformation. Now, last time in question 12, you only have 1 transformation, so it doesn't have a sequence. This one, anyone know how many transformation do we have in this question 14? Is that 1, 2, 3, 4? 4 is the most I can give to you. I won't give you more than 4 transformations. Is that 1, 2, 3, or 4 transformation in this case?
There's 3, right?
That is 3 transformation. You are correct. There are 3 transformation in this case, but you have to tell me which one comes first. And if you doesn't know which one comes first, follow the orders of operation. You guys know PEMDAS, right? So which one comes first? Okay, can you tell me where are the transformations? Eric, you know one of them?
It's the exponents first, right? Because there's no parent function.
We don't have exponents in this case. We start with the parentheses. So this is considered your parenthesis.
Okay.
So do we have a transformation inside this red box?
So it go down to, right? Or up to?
No, this is inside. So it's not up or down. So what is the red box transformation? Yang?
Oh, it's to the left.
This is to the left 2. Yes, the first transformation we have is you have to move left 2. So this is what you guys do in my test. You have to tell me the sequence of it, not just randomly up 4 and then this and that. No, you have to tell me the sequence. So the first sequence in this case is here, left 2. What is the second sequence in this case? Now, as you guys know that PEMDAS, multiply come first. So which one in this case is a multiplying one? Justin, Mercedes, Yang. Anyone? Which one comes next? This is all important. This is all in your test. This is worth around like 6 points or 7 points in your test.
You have to multiply it by negative, right?
Yep. So this is the next one. And what is that, Eric? What was that transformation is if you have if you multiply with negative?
It's a reflection then.
On the x, on the y?
On the x.
Yep, reflection on the x. That's good. So this is what you guys need to do. And the last one we do is this one. So what is that transformation is? This one is easy. Yep, you move down 4. Yes. So yep. So this is what you guys have to do in my test next week. You have not just tell me the transformations. You also have to tell me the sequence of it. So this is what you do next. So all right. So then you have to draw me the graph. So the first graph you have to draw me is the parent graph, which is the square absolute value of x. The absolute value of x is actually a V shape. So a lot of students who do not know how to draw me an absolute value graph, you're going to be in trouble. And yes, graph paper will provide it to you. Okay. And some of you ask me, how is this absolute value graph? I know it's a V shape. How is a V shape? If you remember that when you have a graph paper, so if you want to draw this V shape, it's going to go from one end to another. So it's kind of like go diagonals from one corner to another corner. And then if you want to draw the other V shape, it's the same thing. It's one corner to another corner. So this is how you draw the absolute value in this case for those students who doesn't know. That means that you got coordinates of 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and then -1, 1, -2, 2, -3, 3. So that is how you draw the V shape here. So the first transformation you have is left 2. So when you have left 2 means you have to move left 2 units. So all these coordinates you have to move to, especially this 0, 0, it will be at -2. So now this will be your first transformation. In your midterms, you do not need to do this, but I'm just telling you, you need to draw 2 graphs. You need to draw the black graph, which is a function of x, and you just need to draw the function of g of x. But I'm showing you how you get to the g of x using all the transformation. So once you move left 2, you have to reflect this on the x-axis. So your V shape will become an upside down V shape. So this is the green graph that I showed to you is what we call we reflect it to the x, and then finally we take this green graph and you go down 4. So this is at -2, 0. We'll move to -4, -2, -4. So this is this orange graph that I draw is your g of x. So in your test, as I mentioned, you only need to draw 2 graphs, not so many graphs. You need to draw me the f of x graph, which is the black graph here, the black line. And you need to draw the g of x, the orange one. But if you show me the rest of it, which is fine, but as you guys know that I'm using colored pencil here or colored pens, so you can see that which one is which. But in a test, if you just use pencil, everything is going to be black. So for me, because everything is black, so I don't know which one is it. So what I do here is usually I fuzzy it. So once I fuzzy it, then we know that this will be your final answer. So for those students who do in my test that you draw multiple graphs like this, okay. So usually I will fuzzy the graph for my final answer, and then I kind of know where your basic function is, what we call as parent function is. So this is how we do part C here. How we graph this. And lastly, part D is you have to write g of x in terms of f of x. So what happens in this case is that we know that f of x in this case is the absolute value of x, which will be replaced by here. So what we have in this case is we got g of x here. And since this f of x is been replaced by the absolute value of x, so we still have the negative outside. So you put a negative outside and then f of x, because if you look at here, there is only x, but inside here you have x plus 2. So you have to put plus 2 in here to telling me that you are moving to the left 2 and then minus 4. So another word some students, I want to point out to you, if you want you to write the g of x in terms of f of x, means that you have to give me all three of this transformation. Means you have to tell me that you're moving left 2. You also need to tell me that you are having a reflections. And then finally, you have to tell me that you're moving down 4. So you have to have all these three transformation inside the inside this last part. So some students were asking me, how do we write this? So make sure that all three of this transformation is found inside this g of x here. So I'm doing all right here with this question 14. Because these are the type of questions you get in my tests here. Okay, so some of you ask me, these are kind of questions. So if you want to go home and practice this at home, you can practice this using this this question here. Where was it? It's right over here. So 14, 15, and 16. So these are the ones that you see, and they will ask you for, again, identify the parent function, describe the sequence of transformation, and sketch the graph of H. The good news is it doesn't ask you for this. So I will tell you also the same thing in your test, in your midterms. I won't ask you part D. Okay, so in the test, I won't ask you part D. I will just ask you A, B, and C. So those students who are thinking about you want to go home and practice, I will suggest you to do 14, 15, and 16. These are the ones that very similar to what we have here. And it costs around 6 to 7 points. Okay. But in your task, instead of doing part D here, my part D in this case will be in your task, will be replaced with domain and range. Yes. So in your for midterm, the part D will be replaced by domain and range. Domain or range of g of x. I'm talking about g of x, this final graph. Can someone tell me what is the domain of this g of x here? Looking at your graph here. Don't forget, domain is your x values. So anyone know what is the domain here? How far? Yes. I'm sorry?
Is it negative infinity to infinity?
Yes, you're correct. So do not forget that all your absolute value, your domain is always all real numbers, which is negative to positive infinity. That's a domain. Now we talk about range. Range is your y value. So how down can you go and how up can you go? So that is your range in this case. So anyone know what is your range in this case?
It's negative infinity to 0, right?
Not 0. Don't forget, it goes up to here.
Negative 2.
No, again, it's a y value, not the x value.
Oh.
You're not looking at this. You're looking at this one. So it goes from negative infinity to
Infinity still.
No, negative 4.
Oh.
Because this graph does not go all the way. It just goes to negative for the highest. And since it touched at negative 4, so we have to give them a bracket. So this is how we do your domain and range in this case. So make sure that when you guys done, next time, if you guys done with question 25, this 2.5 here on your homework, try to figure out what is the domain and range that you have, because in your midterms, I will ask for the domain and range for this. Okay. So so do not forget that when you guys do all your make sure you guys understand how you do your domain and range, because I will ask you. So this whole questions worth around like 7 points. So make sure you guys 7 or 8 points. So it's a lot really. So make sure you guys understand this. Okay. Anyone have any questions for me on 2.5 before we move on to 2.6? Anyone have any questions for me on 2.5 before I continue with 2.6? So make sure you guys know this. Does anyone need a picture of this or something else on this question 14? Because again, make sure you guys know how to do this. Very important. All right, 2.6. Anyone have any questions on 2.6? But so far, I didn't get any emails for you guys regarding with how to do question. Yep, Mercedes, question 20 on 2.6. I will, yes. All right, so this is, I'm going to do 2.6 now. Question number 20. All right, good. Guys, good. I'm going to do question 20 on 2.6 now. So the number of bacteria in a refrigerated food is given us by this formula. NT equals to 10T squared minus 20T plus 550. And T in this case is between 1 and 20. Now, for those students who doesn't know what is this capital T is, this capital T in this case is temperature. Okay, so as you guys know that your bacteria will grow based on temperature. So that's why you do not leave your food outside. You put it in the fridge, because if you leave your food outside, your bacteria grows faster, and then you put it inside the fridge. So this is the number of NT is the number of bacteria based on temperature. And then when the food is removed from the refrigerator, the temperature is given us by TT. So this is another one. It's given 5T plus 2, where this little t is between 0 and 6. And this little t in this case is your time. As you guys know that when you take the food out from the fridge, your temperature will goes up because it's warm. So based on your time, so if you take the longer time, the temperature will be warmer. So that's why you don't take out so long, okay, for your food. So this is the two functions we have. So the first question A is asking us to do a compositions of n dot tt. Now, a lot of students think that this dot means multiplication. Oh, I'm going to take this thing, the nt, and multiply with the tt, and then you FOIL it out. No, this is not multiplication. This is actually means that you take the function tt, and because the tt is at the end here, and you plug it back into n of t. So what does that mean? Substitution. So what does that mean here is you take all this, the tt, and you plug it back into t here. That is the meaning of n dot tt, means that you take the function of t and you substitute it back into n, the function of n, in all the capital T's. So this is the meaning of it. So make sure you guys know what this means, because a lot of students do wrong in the test and they just multiply everything. So 10 squared minus 20 used to be capital T plus 550. So what happens in this case is this blank spots that you see used to be T, now will be replaced by 5T plus 2. Now, the first thing, you're not done yet. The first thing you got here is you have to FOIL this one out. You have to FOIL it out. So does anyone know how to FOIL 5T plus 2 squared? Or another meaning is 5T plus 2 times with 5T plus 2. So I would really strongly for you guys to do this foiling, because a lot of students do this. Oh, 5T squared is 25T squared, and 2 squared is 4. And this is wrong. So I see a lot of students do this in the test. And do you know what happens if this is wrong? Everything underneath that is all going to be wrong. So you got a really big deduction point here. So for me, for you guys who are still like, do not do this because it's going to be wrong, I will recommend you to FOIL it out. So please FOIL this out. Can someone tell me what you get when you FOIL it out? You guys know how to FOIL, right? You get. Anyone FOILing? It's not difficult. Mercedes, Yang, Eric, Justin. Yep. You are correct. 25 t squared plus 20t plus 4. Very good, Mercedes. This is correct. You're right. Then what you need to do here is, because there is a 10 in front, you see there's a 10. So you need to multiply this by 10. So you have to distribute 10 to your answer here. So you get a big number, yes. So you will get 250t squared, because you multiply it by 10, plus 200t plus 40. And what you have here is just this part. What you're doing is just the first part of it. And you're still not done yet because we still need to do the middle part. So you have to distribute the negative 20 here. So you get negative 100t minus 40. And then you still have the 550 behind it. And the last thing you need to do is combine like terms. You find out that the 40 here is 0, so you can cancel out. So you still have the 250t squared. And then 200t, take away 100t, you get 100t. And then plus 550. So this is your answer for part A. This is where you put it over here. Make sure that this t that you use is a lowercase, not the uppercase. So if you use a capital T here, they will mark you wrong. So this is 250t squared minus 100t plus 550. So this is the answer for question A. Not minus, it's plus. And then this question is asking is, what is this n dot tt means? As you guys know that this n dot tt is a number of bacteria in time. So last time when you have this function, this is a number of bacteria in temperature. So this is the number of bacteria in time. So in this case, yep, so the answer here is this one, the number of bacteria as a function of time. So this is the n dot tt stands for. Okay. Part B, part B, in order for us to do part B, it's very easy. You just need to replace 0.5 inside here. So in order for us to do NT of 0.5, means that your temperature is 0.5. So you just need to replace 0.5 inside here. So this one, I think you guys know how to do it. Use your calculator for sure. So put 0.5 in here and plus 550. You will get your answer here straight away. So B is quite, once A, if you know how to do A, B is quite easy. You just substitute the little t with 0.5. So that is not the difficult part. So I leave that to you. Then you guys can figure it out. But part C is a difficult one. It says that find the time when the bacteria reach 3,000. So what is telling us to do for part C here now is this NTT is gonna be 3,000. So that means that your equation will be this equation, 3,000 equals to this. This is the equation for part C, where they give us a number of bacteria is 3,000. You had to figure out your time. So in order for you to do this, you have to make it equals to 0. Okay, so I need to subtract 3,000 on both sides. So this will become 0. So 0 equals to 250 t squared plus 100 t. And then you have to subtract 3,000 from 550. Calculator 3,000 minus 550. This is negative 2,450. Now, next, when you do this, is you have to use a quadratic formula. You guys know your quadratic formula, right? What's your quadratic formula?
X equals b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all
Negative b, don't forget you got a negative in front, right? Plus minus of what?
square root
Of what?
b squared minus 4ac over 2a.
Now, when you do all over, make sure the line is not like this. Make sure the line is all over. Okay, so I got students do like partially. This is don't do partially. Now, yes, you can figure out this is your A, this is your B, and this is your C, and plug it into this formula. Unfortunately, the numbers is super big here. So what do I do here is you reduce it. So reduce this. So do not use ABC on this equation. You can, it's not wrong, but you get super big number. So we just reduce it so it's easy. So since they all have a 0 at the back, so I can cross the 0 out. See that? So the number is getting smaller. And then all this can be divided by 5. So when you divide everything here by 5, your equation is so much smaller and your ABC is smaller to plug it in, it's easier. So when you reduce 25 by 5, you got 5t squared. This you will get only 2t. And 245 divided by 5, you will get 49. So now the equation looks much more simple. So you plug your A, which is 5, B is 2, and C is negative 49 into this quadratic formula. So you will get a negative 2 because your B is 2, plus minus B squared, which is 4, minus 4 times A, which is 5, and C is negative 49, all over by 2A. A in this case is 5, so 2 times 5 is 10. So what we do here is you can use your calculator to calculate this. So so this, make sure you guys know how to use your calculator. This one is very important. This is square root. Oh, sorry, this calculator is a bit different. 4 minus 4 times 5 times 49 negative. So that gives me 984. So this is actually is the square root of 984. And then you take the square of it. That's my calculator. So square root of this. So you get a bunch of decimals. So this is a negative 2 plus minus 31 point something. All these numbers, 31 point. Can you round this number? The answer is no, you cannot round it. So it's 31.368 something over by 10. Now, because this is about time, and time cannot be negative, so what happens in this case is your plus minus is no longer needed. You just need to do the plus. The reason why you do not need the minus sign is because negative 2 minus 31 point something, you get a negative answer. And as you guys know that time cannot be measured in negative, so you drop it. So what you do now is you just put on the positive one. So you just take this 331 something and minus 2. and then after that divided by 10. So your answer in this case is 2.9 something. 2.937. Now you can round. So when you reach the final answer, you can round your answer. So that is your answer for this case. So your time in this case, in how many decimals? 3 decimals place, which is I got 3 decimal place. 2.937 is the answer in this case. That's my calculator. You guys all right here with this? 2.9. Yep, 2. Mercedes, you got it? You know how to do this question now? Question number 20. I leave this on you. You guys all right here? You can take pictures of this if you need to. I didn't do B yet, so I think you guys can use your calculator to figure out B easily. So figure out your B is easy to figure out, but C and A is a difficult one. A and C. All right. So anyone have any questions with this 2.6 before I go through a bit more questions with you guys? Anyone? Anyone? All right. So when we do composition function, I want to point out again, the one that we just did just now is the composition function where you do the dot part. Okay. So it has f dot g of x and g dot f of x. So there are 2 types of composition function that is really we use a lot. Okay. Now, what is this f dot g of x? This is actually you take the g of x function and you plug it back into the f of x function. So a lot of students who doesn't know the composition function is always the last one. Okay, the last one is the one that you do plug it into the first one. Okay, so sometimes you can have f dot g dot f of x. Yes, you can have multiple functions. So what happened is you take the f of x function, plug it into the g of x function, and then the g of x function, plug it back into the f of x function. So this is the meaning of f dot g dot f of x. Means you always look at the last one first, and then you slowly plug it into the front of it. Okay, so that's the meaning of such function, but I do not concentrate too much on it, but we're going to concentrate on just these functions that we have here. So what we're going to talk more about this composition function, same thing happens to g dot f of x, means that you do the f of x first, and then you plug it into the g of x. So because f of x comes at the very back here, so you plug it back inside there. Now, the one that we just did just now, the n dot t, is going to be a composition functions, but a lot of students has trouble with the domain. This is the one that I will need to talk about because in your midterm next week, we'll talk about the domain here. Very important. Okay. Now, how do you figure out the domain of f dot g of x? The domain of f dot g of x consists of 2. One, the whole f dot g of x, the domain of it, and the domain of g of x. So a lot of students that having questions with this domain is the g of x actually has a domain by itself. So because you start that first, so if your domain having an issue, then you cannot even plug it back into f dot g of x. So that's how you figure the domain of f dot g of x. It's the domain of the f dot g of x and the domain of g of x. For this case, the g dot f of x, the domain in this case is the domain of g dot f of x and the domain of f of x, which is the beginning of it. Okay. For example, I can give you some example here. So let's say fx in this case is a square root of x plus 2. Let's do x minus 2. And let's say your domain for g of x is, let's say x plus 8. Make it easier. Okay. So, so these are the two functions we have. So the first thing they're asking you to do is figure out what is f dot g of x, the composition function. So what you do here is you take all this and plug it into the f of x. So this is actually is a square root of something minus 2. And what do you put inside this something is x plus 8, the g of x. And don't forget, you have to reduce this. So this is going to be x minus 6, x plus 6, sorry. So square root of x plus 6. So now the question is asking is, what is this domain is? This is the one that a lot of students get wrong in the test. This domain consists of two. The domain of this and the domain of, which one do we start first? Which one do we plug in first, f or g in this case? Anyone? Anyone know what's domain for f dot g of x, and the domain of which one do we plug in first, the f of x or the g of x in this case?
We did the g of x, right?
Yep, the g of x, yes, because we plug g of x into f of x. So now you have to figure out these two domains. Now the good news is the g of x domain is x plus 8. Does anyone know what is the domain for that? We'll talk about this in the first week or second week of class. Domain, very important. Anyone know what the domain of x plus 8 is? Don't forget, this is a polynomial function. You guys remember what happens when you have a polynomial function? What is the domain? I still have that one. Anyone remember what's the domain here? Very important. This is in your task next week. So the domain in this case is going to be all real numbers. Don't forget, all polynomial functions, the domain is all real numbers. Next is the domain of f dot g of x, which is this one. Can someone tell me how you figure out the domain for him? How you figure out a square root, the domain for a square root. This is what you guys learn in 2.2, domain. Just have 2 weeks ago. Anyone?
It's the plus or minus square root, right?
I'm sorry?
Well, there's the plus and minus the square root, right?
No, that's not the domain.
Oh.
Nope, doesn't have that. Okay, I'm gonna go through this one more time with you guys. And if you guys doesn't know what is going on with the domain here, you're gonna say goodbye to your test, because your test, a lot of them is asking a domain here. Okay, this is something you guys better pay attention or write somewhere down, because this is where you guys need to know your domain. Okay. So if you have a polynomial function, your domain is always all real numbers. Like this, x plus 8 is a polynomial function. X cubed minus 2x plus 5. This is a polynomial function. The domain is all real numbers. Okay, I don't care. This is called polynomial functions. What happens if you have a square root of x? Your domain in this case is you take whatever inside this and make it greater than or equal to 0. And that is the domain for a square root. So for this part, when you have a square root of x plus 6, what is the domain in this case? What do? I take all this, make it greater than or equals to 0, right? So what's the domain in this case? X is what? Greater than or equals to. Come on, you can solve this one, right?
6.
Not 6. -6. So this is the domain for this case if you have an absolute value on it. You have a square root on it. But what happens if you have, this is even, you have even root. What happens if your index is an odd index? Then you have all real numbers. So if you have an odd index here, that means a cube root, a fifth root, a seventh root, then your domain is also all real numbers. All real numbers means negative infinity to positive infinity. That's all real numbers. Next, what happens if you have fraction, a rational function? What is a domain in this case? Anyone? We just go through this last 2 weeks ago. This will be in your test next week. Anyone know how to figure out your domain here? What happens when you have a fraction? What happens to your denominator when you have a fraction? Yang, Justin? You guys did this before in 2.2. And yes, it will be asked again in your final, in your midterms. What happens to your domain here? Your denominator cannot be what? Cannot be, hello? 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 Yang, Justin? Yes, cannot be 0. So what you do here is you solve for x here. So what happens when you solve for x in this case? You get what? Anyone know how to solve for x here? -2/3. Yes. So what is your domain in this case? Your domain is not -2/3. It's going to be all real numbers except what? -2/3. So you cannot take this number. So make sure you guys know the domain here because a lot of students, you're going to get in trouble. So like this kind of questions that ask you, they need to know domain. So now you got two domain. One is x is greater than or equals to -6, and the other one is all real numbers. So the domain in this case, because you got two, the all real numbers will not be the correct domain. So this is the domain for this case. So make sure you guys know how you figure out your domain in this composition function. You have to figure out the domain of f.g of x and the domain of g of x. In this case, the domain here is x greater than or equals to -6. Now, let's use back exactly the same question, but now we do the g dot f of x. What is g dot f of x? Is you take the f of x and you plug it into the g. So something plus 8. And this x will be replaced by square root of x minus 2. Now, can you combine the -2 and the 8 become a +6? Can you do that? Can you combine those two? No, you cannot, because this is, so your answer is this. This is your answer in this case. So now the question now is to figure out what is the domain of this. So in this case, you have to do two domain. One is a domain of this g dot f of x. And one is the domain of f of x. Because f of x is the first one that you plug in first, which in this case is the square root of x minus 2. So can someone tell me what is the domain of square root of x minus 2? Like what we just did over here, remember? On this one, that's exactly what you do. Make it greater than or equals to 0. So what's the domain here? X is
greater than or equal to 2.
And what is the domain of the g dot f of x that we just have here? The 8 is redundant. Again, inside here is the square root. So this domain is also the same. X is what? Greater than or equals to 2, because it's the same square root here. So what is the domain in this case? Your domain for the g dot f of x will be him, because they are exactly the same. So then your domain will be the same. X is greater than 2. So this is how we figure out the domain of g dot f of x. So just want to tell you that be careful with this. A lot of students get this wrong in the test, especially with the domain piece here. So make sure you understand that, and the domain is found using this. Make sure you know how to figure out the domain in this case. Okay. Questions on the composition of the domain functions here, because it's in your test next week. All right, now we have a little bit time, so we're gonna talk about 2.7. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you how to do 2.7 here. So 2.7 is talking about inverse function. Inverse function is written down as f minus 1x. Okay, this is the inverse function. Okay, this is the symbol for it. So there are some rules about inverse function. First, it has to be a function. A function means that it is past the vertical line test. You guys know what is a vertical line test, right? You guys know what's a vertical line test? What's a vertical line test is? Every vertical line you only cross how many times on the graph?
Just one.
Just one, yep. And second, to have an inverse function, it has to be one-on-one. One-on-one means that it will pass the horizontal line test. So that in order for you to have an inverse function, it has to pass both the vertical and the horizontal line test. And what is a horizontal line test? Same thing as vertical line, but this time you draw a horizontal line and it can only cross the graph one time. So if you pass this 2, then you will get an inverse function. Now, my question is, what happens if you do not pass the horizontal line test? Then you have to restrict the domain. Okay, for example, parabola. Okay, a parabola is x squared, but we know it has its inverse function. Its inverse function is a square of x. However, yes, it passed the horizontal line test because every vertical line test, because every vertical line you cross, you only touch at one point. So it does pass the vertical line test. But for the horizontal line test, it failed. The reason why it failed is because it crossed 2 points. But it does have an inverse function. So what do is we restrict the domain. What is by restricting the domain is, instead of taking the whole all real numbers domain, the whole parabola, what do is I just restrict the domain to part of it, like this part. So if you restrict it to the positive part, then you will have an inverse function of square root of x. So it does pass, when you restrict it, it passed the vertical or the horizontal line test now, because it only crossed 1 point here. So if you have x squared, then you have to tell me that your x in this case has to be greater than or equals to 0. This is what we call as the domain restriction. Then your inverse function will be square root of x. Sometimes it can be also x squared, but now my domain restriction is x is less than or equals to 0. So for that case, we do not take the right side, we only take the left side of the function. And when you take the left side of the function, it still passes the horizontal line test. So the inverse function that we have in this case is going to be the negative square root of x. So be careful with this domain restriction that I'm teaching you here. It depends on the domain restriction. And if your domain restriction is on the positive side, then the inverse function will take the positive side. Same thing when you have a negative side, then the inverse function will be the negative side. It also same thing happens to absolute value. As you know that absolute value is a V shape. It does not pass the horizontal line test. So if you take the absolute value of that, and if you take the positive side, it does have an inverse function. The inverse function is just x. Same thing happens when you take the absolute value of x, but you take the negative side, then the inverse function will be a negative x. So make sure you guys know that. So these are the only two functions that I'm telling you that do not pass the horizontal line test. X squared and absolute value of x for this class. In the future, there are more than that. But this case, in this class right now, these are the two. So it does not pass. So it does need a domain restriction. And the domain restriction can be either taking the positive side or the negative side. Okay, so this is what we call the inverse function. Okay, now, secondly, checking. How do we know that these two functions are inverse to each other? It's very easy. Is you do the composition. The f dot inverse, you will get exactly x. And the f inverse dot f, you also get exactly x. So what happened is that if you know that these two x squared and square root of x are inverse, so if you do the dot means you plug it in here, you get exactly x. And then if you plug the x squared over in the here, you also get exactly x. So if you get exactly x on each one of this is how you check that if these two functions are inverse to each other. Okay, so this is how we check. So these are very important. Next, domain and range. Yes, see, we talk about domain range again. The function, the domain of the inverse function is the same thing as the range of the original function. The domain of the original function is the same as the range of the inverse function, and the range of the original function is the same as the domain of the inverse function. So what do I want to tell you about domain and range of this function is they flip-flop. So that means that, let's say the x squared here, the domain is x is greater than 0, let's say, and range is x is less than 5, example. So what happens to its inverse function? So for the inverse function, the domain and range is being flipped. That means the domain is this one, and this will be its range. So I want to point out to you guys that, so if you know the domain and range for one of the original function, to find the domain and range of the inverse, you just flip them around. Okay, coordinates. Coordinates is very also easy. If you have an original function, the coordinates is x, y. And if you have the inverse function, the coordinates switch around y, x. So let's say that x squared has a coordinates of 2, 4, because 2 squared is 4. Square root of x, which is the inverse function of it, will have the coordinates of 4, 2. Means that your xy is being switched around. So these two will have an inverse. This is called the inverse function. Okay. So for coordinates wise, your xy and yx will be switched around. Graph. In order for you to have a graph of both inverse and its original function, it will reflect on y equals to x. What does that mean here is, let's say you do a graph, and this graph is a square root of x. Is a x squared, where x is greater than or equal to 0, means we take this form. This is your graph for x squared, when x is greater than or equal to 0. And then you take the square root of x, which is the inverse, which we know is going to go like that. This is the inverse. So what happens with these two graphs, if you look at it, if you draw y equals to x is this little dashed line here. So if you have a piece of paper, if you draw these two, and if you fold this paper on this dashed line, you find out that these two graphs will kind of like coincide, like they all will be the same. Okay, that means that this black line here will be reflect on this red line, and then this black line here will reflect. So when you fold it into that the y equals to x line, you find out that they are the same. So this is the inverse function of what I'm talking about here. So they are very important. So make sure, in order for you to have inverse function, it has to pass the vertical line test and pass the horizontal line test. In order for you to check it, these two inverse function, if you do the composition, you get x, both of them must be both. Okay. The domain and range for inverse function is flipped around with the original function. The coordinates for the inverse function is also switched around. And for the graph piece, it has a reflections on y equals to x. Okay. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about inverse function is, how do you find an inverse function? Okay, this is important. So how do you find inverse function? So in order for you to find the inverse function, first thing is interchange x to y and y to x. So you switch your x and y around. Next, you solve for y. And then finally, you just replace y to be the inverse function. So this is how you find the inverse function here. Is you switch your x, y around, and then you solve for y, and then after that, you replace y with the inverse function. So let me give you an example on this type of question on the inverse function. For example, is f of x equals to square root of x plus 5 minus 8. Okay. So you need to find the inverse function of this. So how do you find the inverse function of this? Is you replace first this into y equals to x plus 5 minus 8. And then you switch your x and y around. So you got x equals to square root of y plus 5 minus 8. And you solve for y. So what you do is you add 8 over here. So you got x plus 8 equals to y plus 5, square root of y plus 5. And then you square both sides. So the square will cancel out. So it becomes x plus 8 square equals to y plus 5. And then you move the 5 over there. So it becomes x plus 8 square minus 5. And this is your inverse function. Then you replace your y. So this is how we do it. You interchange your x and y. You solve for y. And then after that, you replace your y, become the inverse function. Now, because of the square, remember last time the square has its restricted domain. So this restricted domain is going to be x is greater than or equals to -8. So do you guys know where I get this number from? X is greater than or equals to -8. So last thing before you guys go. This -8 comes from this one, x plus 8. So what you do next time is that if you want to figure out the domain restriction for a square function, you look at what is inside here and make it equal to 0, and you get -8. And the reason why we use greater than or equals to is because this square root is a positive. Do you know what happens if I change this to a negative square root? You still get exactly the same answer. The only difference here is your domain here is no longer greater than or equals to -8. It's going to be less than or equals to -8. So this is the difference between your domain restriction here. It depends on what side your square root is. Positive, you make greater than, equal to. Negative, you use less than or equal to. And the 8 comes from whatever inside this 8 here. You guys with me here, how you figure out, so this is very important. This is all in 2.7. So when you go home and do your 2.7 homework, this out of all this thing I just mentioned, the one that finding the inverse function is the most important piece that you will see in the test. For example, we look something like this. Okay, so make sure you guys know how you guys find the inverse function. Very, very important. Okay, and the domain and range is also important because it's been flipped around. So make sure you guys know how to find the domain and range in this case. Okay. All right, that's it for today. So do not forget, we still have a Zoom meeting next Tuesday, and that Zoom meeting on Tuesday will talk about 2.7. And then we will also review for your tests because you have a test on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we do have a Zoom meeting next Tuesday. I know it's election day. We do have it. And we will talk about 2.7, which is you got one homework due next week. And then after that, please concentrate on your test. And where do you concentrate on your test on is on the last page of chapter 2, where you see the chapter test here. So please try to do all these kind of questions because I will ask you like this question, the domain. So make sure you guys know how to use this, how to do all these questions. There are 22 questions here. So please do them. If you have any questions, please let me know or set a one-on-one Zoom with me. Okay, so I'm gonna stop recording here.